All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive.
Today we're going to get into some really, really cool stuff. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, this should be fun.
This is all about sales performance, and we're using Elite Sales Training as our source.
EST, yeah.
EST, yeah. So these guys they're kind of like, if you can imagine, like the Navy SEALs
Right.
of sales training. So they're hardcore. They get results.
Yeah,
They've been around. They got a ton of experience. And they have 7 tips, and we're gonna go through all 7 of these tips.
Okay.
And I think some of these are gonna really surprise you, actually.
Yeah, a couple caught my eye when I was reading through this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Like, for example, one of them is like,
Oh, yeah.
sell to the elephant. What does that even mean? Right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into a bunch of other things too about asking the right questions.
We're going to talk about storytelling.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, all that good stuff. So, are you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so tip number 1 is this whole sell to the elephant thing.
Yeah.
So, can you explain what the heck that even means?
Yeah, so the sell to the elephant idea is really an analogy, and they kind of break it down like this. You've got the rider, and then you've got the elephant.
Okay.
And the rider is the logical part of our brain. So the rider's got the reins. They're trying to, like, spear the elephant. They're trying to make good logical decisions.
Uh-huh.
But then you've got this elephant, and the elephant is much bigger and stronger
Right.
than the rider. And the elephant is the emotional side.
Yeah.
And so much of the time our decisions are actually driven by emotion.
Yeah, I can see that.
Much more so than logic.
And that makes sense with, like, the elephant being so much bigger.
Right. Yeah, the elephant's going to win that battle almost every time.
Totally. Okay, so how do we apply this to sales?
So what EST is saying is that you need to appeal to both. You need to appeal to the rider and you need to appeal to the elephant.
Yeah.
So you can give people the logical reasons to buy. Right.
But you also need to make sure that you're speaking to their emotions as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and you need to understand kind of what is driving them emotionally.
Yeah.
What are their motivations?
So, like, how do you figure that out?
Well, this is a good segue into the next tip, which is all about asking the right questions.
Okay, yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah.
So tip number 2, ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everybody asks questions, right? Like,
Yeah.
what makes these questions so special?
Yeah, it's not just about asking any old question. It's about being strategic with the questions that you ask.
Okay.
So think about it like this. You can ask a closed-ended question,
Mm-hmm.
like, are you happy with your current provider?
Okay.
And that can be answered with a yes or a no.
Right.
But if you ask a more open-ended question like,
Yeah.
what are some of your biggest frustrations with your current provider?
Yeah.
Now you're getting them to open up and share more.
Right.
And you're going to get a much more in-depth answer.
And you're going to learn more, I guess. Right, exactly. And those insights are really valuable. They're going to help you understand their needs and their pain points
Yeah.
and ultimately sell to that elephant.
Right. Okay, so deeper questions, more open-ended questions.
Exactly.
But then it's not just about asking them. It's also about listening to the answers.
Oh, absolutely. Active listening is crucial.
Oh.
When a customer shares something with you, reflect it back to them to show that you're really paying attention.
Okay.
So you could say something like, oh, it sounds like reliability is really important to you.
Okay.
Or it seems like you're looking for a more personalized experience.
Got it. So it's really about building that connection and building that relationship.
Yeah.
Which actually reminds me of tip number 3,
Okay.
which is build relationships, not just sales.
I love that one.
Yeah. I got to admit, I used to think this was kind of like fluffy feel-good stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah. Be nice to people. We get it. But EST makes a really strong case for like why this is so important.
Yeah, it really is about building those long-term relationships
Yeah.
because, when you have a good relationship with a customer,
Yeah.
they're more likely to stick around.
Yeah.
They're more likely to buy from you again,
Yeah.
and they're more likely to refer their friends and family.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And, actually, EST, they mentioned this statistic that 80% of sales require 5 follow-ups.
5 follow-ups.
Yeah, so it's not just about making that initial sale. It's about nurturing that relationship over time.
Yeah. Wow. I'm definitely guilty of not following up enough.
I'm going to have to work on that one.
Okay. So tip number 4, This one sounds really fun to me. The power of storytelling.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
I love a good story.
Me too.
But how does that apply to sales?
So storytelling is really powerful because it allows you to connect with people on an emotional level.
Okay.
Instead of just listing off a bunch of features and benefits,
Yeah.
you can tell a story that illustrates how your product or service has helped someone, and that makes it much more relatable and memorable.
Yeah, that counts.
People are much more likely to remember a story
Right.
than they are to remember a list of facts.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me an example. How would you actually use this?
So let's say you're selling software
Okay.
that helps businesses streamline their operations.
Mm.
Instead of just saying, our software can save you time and money, you could tell a story about a customer who was struggling to keep up with their workload.
Okay.
And then they implemented your software, and it freed up hours of their time each week.
Oh, I like that.
And now they're able to focus on more strategic initiatives.
Yeah, and it makes it real.
Right.
It makes it human.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's a good one.
All right, time to talk about the thing that I think a lot of people dread.
Uh-huh.
Tip number 5, handling objections effectively.
Ugh, objections are the worst.
Well, actually, EST has a really interesting perspective on this.
Okay.
They say that objections are actually opportunities. Yeah, they are, because an objection is essentially the customer telling you what's holding them back from buying.
Right.
So it's giving you valuable information.
Yeah, but it's still annoying.
I know, but
Yeah.
but if you can reframe it in your mind as an opportunity
Okay.
to learn more about the customer's needs and address their concerns,
Okay.
then it becomes much less daunting.
Okay, so how do we actually handle them then?
So the key is to listen empathetically
Okay.
and try to understand where the customer's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get defensive.
Right.
Just acknowledge their concern and then ask clarifying questions.
So like, for example,
Yeah, so let's say a customer says your product is too expensive.
classic.
Instead of immediately jumping into a defensive mode,
Right, right.
you could say something like, I understand that cost is a consideration.
Okay.
Could you tell me more about your budget
That was good.
and what you're hoping to achieve with this product?
Yeah, because now you're getting more information from them and you're not just like shutting them down.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, so now we're on to tip number 6. The moment of truth, closing with confidence.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people find this part really awkward.
It can be.
Yeah, like how do we make this less cringy?
So EST's advice is to not think of it as this big scary thing.
Okay.
It's really just about summarizing the value that you've discussed,
Okay.
confirming that the customer understands, and then making it clear what the next steps are.
Okay.
So there are a lot of different closing techniques that you can use,
Okay.
but one that I like is the summary close.
Okay, tell me about that.
So basically you just recap the key points and benefits that you've covered,
Mm-hmm.
and then you say something like, so based on what we've discussed, it seems like our product is a good fit for your needs.
Yeah.
Would you like to move forward?
Okay, so you're not being pushy.
Right.
You're just sort of like recapping everything.
Right, and giving them an opportunity to say yes.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, cool.
And then last but not least, tip number 7.
Continuous learning and improvement.
Yes,
Now, this one feels like it could apply to like pretty much any area of life,
it does,
right?
but it's especially important in sales
Okay, why is that?
because the sales landscape is constantly changing.
Mm.
New technologies are emerging.
Yeah,
Buyer behavior is evolving.
right.
So if you want to stay ahead of the curve, you need to be committed to continuous learning.
Okay, makes sense. So what are some ways that people can do that?
Well, there are tons of resources available.
Okay.
You can take online courses.
Yeah.
You can attend industry conferences.
Mm-hmm.
You can read books and articles.
Right.
And I think it's also really important to reflect on your own experiences,
Oh, yeah.
both your successes and your failures.
That's a good point.
What worked well?
Yeah.
What could you have done differently?
Right. Always be learning.
Exactly.
Okay, well, wow. We covered a lot of ground today.
We did.
7 tips from elite sales training.
I got to say, I'm feeling pretty inspired.
Me too.
Like I want to go out and sell something right now.
Yeah.
So what would you say is like the key takeaway from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that anyone can improve their sales skills
Mm-hmm.
if they're willing to put in the effort,
Mhm.
be authentic, build relationships,
Yeah.
ask the right questions,
Mm.
and never stop learning.
So true. So true. All right, listeners, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
On sales performance, make sure you go back and revisit any of those tips that really resonated with you.
And start thinking about how you can put them into practice.
Yeah, good luck out there.
Good luck, everybody.
See you next time.